Okay, so today I had the pleasure of speaking with Ryan Heltemus. He is a guy who went from house hacking his college apartment to now owning over 60 rentals. He's a super impressive guy. We talked about him leaving his 9 to 5, getting scrappy with seller finance, turning mobile home parks into opportunity, and doing it all for the freedom of being more present with his family. Guys, this one's real, it's raw, and it is full of gems. Enjoy. So, Ryan, you left your corporate job, you left security. Why risk it all for real estate?
It wasn't, I just started getting into real estate. I kind of, I'd done the corporate world through it. I was an electrician before I became an engineer. And I always felt like once I got to a certain point, there was just that ceiling. There was where you hit and then you're stuck. And so when I became an engineer, I started reading books about real estate. And that's when I realized like, man, there's unlimited potential. I can be my own boss and make my own hours once you get to a certain point. We were in Bend, bought our first home, and when I moved over to get my first corporate job, we started renting that out. And when I saw those first few paychecks, mail money coming in from the renters, I was hooked. And so I started reading more books, consuming more books, Brandon Turner, Rich Dad Poor Dad, the ones that, people kind of start out with. And then the more I like learned about how this game worked, it just, I was just like, man, I was hooked because I could become my own boss. And I think that's what I was missing in the corporate world is I never was really meant to work for somebody else. I was kind of meant to be my own boss and kind of go on that path.
And now you're poisoned. Now you can never work for anybody ever again.
Yeah, yeah, it would be very hard to go back to working for somebody else because I've kind of now shifted my mind too of maybe even starting some businesses in the future. And I see the potential. It's just a whole mind shift. You get around people like down there at Monterey with the Owners Club and see what they're doing. It's not the mindset I had growing up. My
Same.
dad was neither one of my parents went to college. My dad was worked at a mill. He was a millwright. So, owning a business, owning rentals, that was never, I didn't know anybody that was doing that. I knew a couple people in my extended family's network that own their own business. My uncle had one rental property, and it was just because he bought it and had moved right across the street and bought another house and rented it out kind of casually. Most extent of my real estate at that point was my dad built 3 houses growing up. And so I got to see kind of that process of him building. He did most of the work himself, doing that. So I got to kind of see how that process worked. And I think that's what gave me a lot of confidence when I went to start renovating, as I was like, my dad did this, I can do this. So that helped out on that front quite a bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, I definitely agree with you on the mindset thing. Being around people, especially in owners club, it just completely shifts. Like, man, I've been thinking small, but I say that, but you already, I mean, you scaled up a pretty decent portfolio, pretty much all on your own. I think that's one thing that I pulled from our conversation in Monterey. I was like, man, this guy practically, I mean, he bootstrapped everything from the ground up. I mean, it's not like you were out capital raising or anything like that, which is not as common in the multifamily space. So kind of getting into that, what's how did you even start in as far as what brought you to the path of going down multifamily?
So it kind of started out with that house. We bought a house in Bend. That was actually kind of a funny one. Like, so I was going to college at the time. My wife just got her first job. We moved from kind of small town Castle Rock in Washington. Moved over there. So started college. We were renting an apartment. That's kind of when I got into house hacking. My first thing, we were renting a 3 bedroom apartment for I think 675 a month, and I posted one of the bedrooms online for $500, and we rented out to some random person for $500. So our rent was about $175 a month. So
That's
that was kind
cheap.
of my first. Didn't really plan or didn't really know what house hacking was at the time, but I was kind of house hacking an apartment. Then I was like, oh, I want to buy something. I want to buy a house. I saw, what people were doing in the housing market a little bit and wanted to own something. But my wife had just got her first job. I had just quit as an electrician, topped out, got my license, got one journeyman paycheck, and then I went back to college to become an engineer. So that was a big jump. Got over there, started doing the college. So we weren't making a ton of money, but I wanted to buy a house. So we started looking around, found some houses, and then I kind of started down that journey of, okay, well, what's this look like, getting a mortgage? Like I had no idea about mortgages and talking to banks. So you start talking to them and to get pre-approved, which I had no idea what that meant at the time. They're like, you guys don't make enough money to buy a home. And I was like, okay. So that's, I just went from making almost $100,000 a year as an electrician. Now I'm back in college, so I'm making no money. My wife's first job was as a reporter, so she was just starting out, cutting her teeth on that. Wasn't quite making enough for a house payment. I was like, well, what can we do? And they're like, well, you can get a co-signer to sign on the loan with you guys. And we got her parents to sign on the loan to purchase a home. That solved our first problem. Then they're like, well, how much of a down payment can you put down? I was like, well, I mean, like 10, 15,000. They were like, there's two ways you can go about this. You can go an FHA loan, which at that time was 2013. Things were getting kind of competitive in Bend. So they were like, you can go that route, but you might get beat out on some loans, with other, stronger offers.
Yeah.
So I said, or you can put a, good chunk of money down. Well, I had bought in a property when I was 19 years old. I bought it was like 3.5 acres. My dad kind of was like, hey, you should buy this piece of property and, save some money. So I bought it on seller financing from our neighbor, and I think I bought it for 40,000, 5% interest. I think it was like a 7-year carry. And I had at that time almost I had it paid off. So I was like, I'm gonna put this up for sale. We had gone through, I think I bought it pre 2008, so it had lost value and kind of was on the way back up. I had developed it, put a building site on it, but didn't get to the point of building because plans kind of changed when I moved, met my wife and moved to Bend. So I put it online, I think for 40, ended up selling it for about 38,000. So, lost a couple grand and had the development costs, but it kind of gave me that cash to put down on a home. And we ended up, I think we bought that house for 193, put 20% down, and then the remaining, so kind of how we split it with her parents, they were like, hey, we want some equity in this deal. So we split the house kind of 40-60 on the back end, and it worked out great. Like it kind of that house went up a lot over the next 3 or 4 years, or the next 3 years we lived there. And we moved to Portland, got our first house there, and then started renting that house. And that's when I was like, I like this rentals, but I don't have any cash to go buy the next investment property.
Yeah.
So I was kind of stuck. I didn't know anything about creative financing. Um,
Wait a minute. You say you didn't know anything about creative financing, but you were 19 and you did a seller finance
yeah,
for some property. It's funny
yeah, and
where
I
like
had
we
some
limit
help.
ourselves sometimes, but yeah, yeah, go on.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's totally true. It's like I knew it, and I will admit my dad helped me on that side of things. I didn't know a lot about it. I was kind of like, okay, I was talking to banks and they're like, you need 25% down to buy these properties. I'm like, I don't have 25% down. I just graduated college. Kind of funny story. The house that we bought in Portland, when we were getting ready to move over there, I'm like, I don't have a down payment for homes. So my last 2 quarters of college, I took out the max amount of student loans that they would allow. I had the cash to pay for it at the time because I was flipping vehicles and paying for college, but I took out the max they would allow. I think it gave me like $25,000. That's what I actually used as my down payment on that home that we bought in Tigard. But I think we put 5% down on it. And so yeah, now we're looking for investment properties, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to sell the home in Bend. So we sold the home in Bend. I think it went up. We bought that for 193. I think we ended up selling it for about 350. So I think I pocketed about $100,000 after everything all said and done, plus my original down payment of the 40,000. And that's what I used to kind of go into my next deal. So now I had all this money, didn't know about 1031s, which I didn't really need to do on that one because I got the owner $500,000 no capital gains.
Oh yeah, and then you owned it for a couple of years, so
Yeah, I think I lost out a little bit because I rented it for 1 year, so somehow the taxes work out there where you have to pay a little bit. But so now I was kind of looking for properties. Well, what happened in that time is I was reading books. Brandon Turner was talking about the 2% rule, and I'm trying to find properties that have this 2% rule. Like I'm like, where's this magic unicorn
yeah.
of the 2%?
Explain for the audience like 2% roll. What does that mean?
So that's like if you buy a house at the time, say I think a house was probably going for like 400,000, you should be renting that out for like 2% of what your purchase price is.
Mhm.
So I mean that would be $8,000 a month or something, or yeah, right, $8,000 a month. Yeah, complete unicorn. Like not it doesn't exist. And so I started adjusting that down to 1%, and I'm like, where can I buy a house that I can rent for $4,000 a month? And couldn't find it. So I was listening to a podcast, and the guy's like, don't get into analysis paralysis. Go buy a deal that, makes some good cash flow, and then cut your teeth learning the different things, learning how to write leases, learning how to do background credit checks on people, learn how to deal with tenants, maintenance, and just you get that under your belt, because that seemed like a big Mount Everest at the time. Was just, okay, how's this all going to work once I get a property? I had done the one in Bend with the leases, but that was with a friend. So it's a
Mm.
lot easier. You're not dealing with somebody you don't know. So I went and on the MLS, I found a property for about 250,000. I think my mortgage on that at the time was about 16,000 or 1,600 a month, and I rented it out for about $1,900. So with capex, vacancy, pretty much making not much money on that property, if any. But it got me into a property and kind of got me going. Soon after that, I found a duplex on Craigslist, and it was for sale by owner. So I kind of started learning the process. I called the guy up and I'm like, hey, I like your property. Like, how do we do this without an agent? And he's like, I don't know. He's like, if you can figure it out, he's like, I'll give you a discount on the back end. So I went down to my local like escrow and was talking to them, and they're like, or title company, was talking to them, and they're like, hey, all you need is a purchase and sale agreement between you guys. They're like, we can't provide you one because it's kind of, we don't want to give you the wrong one. So I was like, they're like, you can find them online. So I went online and found the most god awful like purchase and sale agreement you could find. I think it was from another state. I modified it and just put it to my state, and kind of like, pretty much got just a piece of paper that was an agreement.
Yeah, iffy on if it holds much weight, but yeah.
Yeah, if it holds much weight, but it got us. I kind of looked at like the main things that you wanted to hit, like the due diligence periods and the financing contingency and some of those,
Like
things that
furnace
you
running
gotta
down, all
worry
that
about.
stuff.
And got it under contract. I think he knocked like $10,000 off for doing that, and I ended up getting that one for like, is a duplex for about 319,000.
And what were the rents pulling on each side on that one?
So that's so we had just finished a renovation, a full kitchen renovation on the house that we bought right after college. Pretty much, we were getting fast food and to go food, couldn't use our kitchen, just got it completed. It was, what my wife wanted, quartz countertops, all this stuff. And then I go to my wife and I'm like, hey, we're going to move to duplex because I want to do owner financing on this other house. It gets us closer to family. And she's like, I mean, we were living in a really nice area at the time. And
Yeah.
she's like, well, where's it at? I show her and she's like, no, I'm not moving into this duplex.
It's like, come on, honey.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is a great deal. I think it'd be great to be closer to family. We were at that time, planning on having kids soon. And we knew that we were like 2 hours with bad traffic through Portland. It was like 2 hours to see family. So I finally talked her into it. She definitely was reluctant at first. We moved up, or I started the renovations prior to moving in. So we got the painting and, some of that demolition stuff done before we moved in. We moved in, there was like no flooring, no carpet or anything in the house. First night we're staying at the house. My wife's car's window gets broken into, and somebody broke it in, and
That's it.
so it
I'm
didn't
done.
help my cause. Yeah, she's like, what did you get us into? Well, I start talking to some neighbors, and they were like, no, this doesn't happen in this neighborhood. It was 2 blocks away from like $1 million homes, but it was definitely a rental neighborhood where we were at. And I found out it was a party some guys got kicked out of, and they broke out about 5 or 6 windows on the way out with rocks and stuff. So they were just
Like
mad.
bad timing.
They weren't actually breaking into stealing stuff.
Major bad
But
timing
that
for the
one,
wife.
yeah, it didn't help my cause of, it was already some tension there. She was a trooper, coming along and just trusting me on this path, and I was very fortunate in that, because if you don't have somebody that kind of believes in you, if you doing that and coming along, it can make this path very difficult to go down, because you're
Sure.
definitely going to be at certain times, even buying that. I think when we put the down payment down on it, I remember telling her like, "Hey, let's not buy groceries until we get our next, W-2 job payment or paychecks, because things are going to be tight there." We didn't have credit cards at the time, so I was like, "Let's hold off." So there was a few times, where money was tight, but that's kind of where I kind of started doing actual remodeling. I did a little bit at the previous house, but it was not very good at it at the time. I was just learning.
So
So
you
I
were doing
renovated
all
that
the,
unit.
so each of these investments, you were doing all the work yourself starting out.
Yep.
I like it. I
Yeah, I
think there's
didn't
a
hire
common theme
anything.
here of you just messing around and finding out pretty much you hit a roadblock. You're like, okay, there's a way to get this done. And you just figure it out. Maybe it's not
Yep.
the most conventional way, but that's awesome, man.
Yeah, it creates a lot of sweat equity. That was that was kind of the theme of that of this one is, I would I was working about 3 hours away from my house at the time. So I would drive over Monday morning. I was an engineer at the time, drive over Monday morning, stay out there throughout the whole week, and then come back on Friday. And it was about an hour to the job site where I was staying in a hotel and then back. So I mean, I had a lot of that's where I was consuming a ton of content, books, podcasts. That was my second college, I guess you could say, is when I was doing all that driving. Then I would get back on the weekends and I would work from sun up till sundown, remodeling this house, just, getting it done essentially. And so that was a very, we didn't have kids at the time, so it was really easy to do. But I mean, there was a lot of times where, it's 10 o'clock at night and I'm like, I got to go to bed. It's Sunday and I got to get up for work at, 4:30 in the morning to just drive over to Boardman.
Yeah, it still puts stress.
Um,
It still definitely puts stress on the relationship because yeah, I had something similar to where my first set of rentals they needed a ton of work and they were some condos down in the Branson, Missouri area, and I was living up in Kansas City at the time, and it was like an hour and a half drive each way, and it was same thing. You drove out there during the weekend, work sun up to sundown, come back, and then go back to your W-2 job during the week. So I definitely I hear you.
yeah, so that was a fun time because we were learning and we were like, breaking into real estate. I didn't know anybody that was doing the real estate at the time. So I remember family at the time, they're like, you're working too much. We weren't really doing a lot with family because I mean, weekends was the only time I had to do anything.
Yeah.
But I knew these guys were coming, so I was like, I had a plan. My plan was to, get enough passive income that I could be more, I could have that choice on what my next job looked like. But yeah, just kind of powering through at the time. So I got that one remodeled the next door tenant's unit as well. I was like, hey, when are you going to be gone for a 4-day weekend? I got it painted one weekend, and then laid some floors, kind of did just a lipstick remodel on that one, new trim and stuff. And then we refinanced that one. I think I pushed that one up like a couple $100,000 in that amount of time. Pulled a HELOC on it, or no, refinanced it, pulled cash out. That's when we bought another home that we moved into. That was on seller financing. So that's when I kind of first got into the seller financing. Got her to carry a contract for a year because it needed a lot of work. Fixed it up, refinanced, and then pulled a bunch of cash out of that one too. So I was kind of at that point doing the Burr method, parlaying or snowballing into the next deal essentially is what I was working on.
Yeah. So you say delayed a year, so that it was a deferral, like a deferred on payments for the first year.
No, it was just a seller finance deal. I think I put down a big chunk of money because she needed money for her next house. She was kind of reluctant on the seller financing at first, but I said, "Hey, what she had done is she put an offer on a house, put down a decent amount of money. I think she put down 20,000 as earnest money. Thought she could get a loan. She was gonna lose the house, I think, if she didn't, but I think she really wanted it. So I said, "Hey, I'll give you the money you need to kind of make the loan work on your end." And did a 1 year seller carry because I told her I need to do a lot of work to this thing so I can get it bank financed.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha. That makes
so
sense. Okay.
so then I fixed it up, got it bank financed after a year, and then pulled some cash out at that time as well.
Gotcha. So it was like a one year balloon type deal. Got it.
Yep. Yeah. So then that was about, let's see, that would have been 2017-ish. And I kept looking, I was looking for properties, it's like more single family duplexes, quads, and I just couldn't find a deal that, penciled on paper. The cash flows, it was very competitive. The cash flows just didn't happen at that time. So I started looking at like larger properties. I was looking at fourplexes, I guess, at the time because I could get them to kind of pencil a little bit better. I called a broker on a 4 unit that I drove by. I was like, hey, I'm interested in that 4 unit. And she's like, oh, these are townhomes. It's not a 4 unit. But she's like, I've got a 5 unit apartment building coming available this next month. Are you interested in something like that? And I'm like, yeah, I'd be more than happy to take a look at that. I don't, going from a duplex to a 5 unit seemed like a big jump, but I'll definitely look at it. So it was an off-market deal. She sent me the numbers. I looked it over. I had a private money lender for the down payment on that one with some cash that I had as well. So I think I needed like 20,000. I put 25% down on that one. I think they were asking 350 for it. Went through, kind of got it through inspection, negotiated it down to I think 306. But then I kind of got this fear of like, okay, so now what happens if I get 2 units that, two tenants move out at the same time? How do I renovate 2 units at once? And I kind of, that fear crept in and I was like, I'm gonna try to pull a partner in on this deal. So I found it was he was a real estate agent. He was the only guy that I knew that was doing real estate investing at the time. He was the agent that bought our first home when we came to Portland, or that I used to buy our first home. And I called him up and said, "Hey, Chris, do you want to buy a 5 unit with me? I've got the down payment. I've got it negotiated. Do you want to go in on this deal with me 50-50?" If I came to you, Josh, with that deal, would you be like, "Yeah, let's do it"?
I would, but I'm a little crazy. It's
Yeah.
funny because you mentioned the real estate agent. It was a real estate agent that got me into investing too, because he got his license purely just so he could open doors because he was fix and flipping and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So he got his license for investing. So yeah, that's funny. But yeah, I'm crazy enough. I'd probably be like, yeah, no, let's do it.
Yep.
Let's
So
go.
yeah, he jumped in the deal with me and then we were kind of off and running. I think we had, about a turnover every couple months there because we were raising rents, and
Hmm.
there was two or three tenants there that were not very, great tenants, but we inherited them when we bought the place.
I found
Did
almost every single time I inherit tenants, I always regret it. Yeah, every single
Yep.
time.
And it gets better. Like, I mean, when you buy an apartment building, you're getting 5 to 20 to 30 tenants, and so you're always going to have some bad eggs in there. So yeah, at that time we renovated the units. I think that was my first cash for keys. We had a tenant, and it was 4 2 bedrooms, 1 3 bedroom. We did a cash for keys. I think we paid the tenants deposit on our next apartment building, gave her a little cash to move because we started raising rents. She was a single person in a 3 bedroom. She was getting paid by the city to live there, and I think at a certain point they said, "Hey, you should be in a 1 bedroom and we can get it way cheaper." And so we kind of facilitated that, helped her. But yeah, so then we renovated, I think over about 18 months, we renovated 3 of the units, got the other ones up in rent, did some lipstick fixes while the tenants were in there, and then refinanced that one, paid off all the private money and the money that I had put into it, and then we actually cashed out some as well. So I think we pushed that one up about 200,000 in about 18 months there. And that's when I got hooked on the apartment building space because I was like, man, these aren't, based on comparables of the area of another duplex that sold. These are based on the NOI, or the net operating income, that you can push these buildings to.
Mhm.
And then if you can lower expenses, then you just created, not money out of thin air, but you just created value in that building and push what it's worth to a higher level.
Yeah, it's essentially more like a business at that standpoint. Yeah.
Yep.
As long as if you can improve the cash flows and I feel like I don't know a huge deal about multifamily, but it's as long as you can improve the cash flows, yeah, you can increase that quite a bit. Like there's so
Yep.
many different ways you can do it. You can do it with the rubs, like the utilities. You can do it with rent increases. Like I said, I won't speak on that because I really don't know much about multifamily. You're the multifamily guy for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the best part about it is you have your gross income that you bring in through rents. You can push those up, and that makes you more income in the end. But then, like you're saying, is you have expenses. A lot of times you have expenses, and one of them is utilities. If you're paying for the utilities because it's not sub-metered, what you can do is you can do rubs like you talked about, is where you kind of back charge the tenants for water. You say, hey, there's going to be a $50 water or utility surcharge each month to kind of help cover utilities, especially in a time like utilities are starting to get pretty expensive in our area. So it definitely helps, cover those costs, and you can raise them. You can't charge more than what you're being charged for the utilities because you can get in a lot of trouble. But it definitely helps, that lowers your expenses, and you could raise rents. And so now you just push the value of the building up because your net operating income, or what you bring in after all expenses, goes higher. And then so that around that time is when I was like, okay, I'm hooked. I want to get more of these, commercial properties, essentially 5 units and larger. Brandon Turner, around that time, he started talking about mobile home parks, and I got shiny object syndrome, and I was like, I want a mobile home park. These are like cash cows, and I'm going to get in on that. So I start looking around. I don't even know about connecting with brokers at this time.
Yeah.
I'm looking on LoopNet and looking on, other websites that I can find for, commercial properties. And I found a 5 unit mobile home park that was about a mile from where I grew up in my, childhood home. And I think they were asking 225 for this 5 unit mobile home park. And I was like, okay. Called the broker up, kind of, failing forward, had no idea what I was talking about, but he was a really good broker at the time and kind of just educated me on how stuff worked. And I was like, hey, this is a good deal. The problem is, most investors don't want a 5 unit mobile home park. It's more of a headache than it's worth. But he's like, if for a small time guy that's kind of like just getting into it, this is a good way to get, get your feet wet and kind of learn how that process works. So I'm like, sweet, I'm down to, get an offer over to the guy. And I think I offered him 200,000 for it. And so then we went into kind of the due diligence. Ended up one of the septics was failing. I had a buddy who owned a septic company, so he came and did all the inspections, and one of the tanks was failing. I knew that he got a bid. And he was like, it's going to be about 30,000 because the perks on it wasn't a gravity fed system. It had to be a sand mound system. So I ended up getting the seller. I wanted to get him down to like 170, but he was just being super stubborn in the end. And I think he wanted to be at 178, and it ended up we were like, I was ready to walk away. He's like, no. He's like, let's try to make this work. Well, what ended up happening is the broker on the deal gave up half of his commission just to get this thing sold. Because the broker, he was doing 100-unit mobile home parks. He's like, I'm over this. I just want to sell this 5 unit and just be done with it, not have to deal with another buyer. So he gave up half of his agent fees, and then I think we ended up closing around 174 on that deal. What's actually funny, it's kind of comical at this point, is I had a tenant pass away recently at the mobile home park.
That's a new one. I haven't come across that yet. I'm interested to hear how you handled that. That's
Yeah, so it's definitely an interesting kind of how it works. I think I've had four tenants pass away at this point,
oh
and it's
geez.
gone smoothly every time so far. I know there's going to be one that's, difficult. It's a little bit different on a mobile home park because they own the mobile homes, and so there's a probate, you know, thing that you have to go through. The son was very, willing to jump on a phone, have conversations. It could get tough if that wasn't the case. So I would say if you're doing the mobile home parks, definitely have within the lease agreement, who owns the mobile home, who's the next, have them fill out like who actually gets that, in the end. Because it makes it a little bit, it's a different scenario than say an apartment building. I have somebody pass away, then the lease, ends at that point, and then I can go find somebody else after, you contact their next of kin or whatever to get their stuff out. This one worked out really well. Like he was very communicative. His mom had a little more debt than what the mobile home was worth. And so if he, I guess, inherited everything, he inherited the credit card debt plus her assets. Well, he was like, I don't want to inherit it because it's not worth, the debt is more than what the assets are.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'll just sign the title over to you and you can have the mobile home. So I was like, okay, I'll do that. So we went to the courthouse. He was like, you figure out how to make that happen and I'll meet you there. So went and figured that out. We met at the local courthouse. He signed the mobile home over to me. I think I paid, she was like 3 years behind on taxes. So there was like a $1,500 tax bill there. $1,500 to get a mobile home, pretty cheap. I think I put about 20,000 into it because the roof was leaking, and all this plywood underneath the roof was rotten as well. So it was about an $8,000 job. And then we did new flooring. She had cats. So the cats had peed everywhere in the house. It stunk. So I had to prime everything, cleaned it a couple different times, ozone, painted, and then did floors. Well, what's funny is we're planning on building about a mile from this place. And I was going to lease option this to somebody and then let them move in. But I was like, well, we're going to be building. I want to GC our next build. So why don't we just move in there? And so that's actually where I'm at right now is we're living in the mobile home on my 5 unit mobile home park.
Are you kidding me?
Uh,
That's awesome.
yeah, so we're living here for free. I mean, there's still a cost to it because
Yeah.
I could be renting this for $600 a month, but I'm,
Yeah, but still, I mean,
living
that's
in it.
super minimal. That's
But we're kind of like definitely had to convince my wife. She wasn't about it. She was like she loved, being in the city, but we've got, a 4 and a 6 year old now, and it's fun to be able to see them just running around outside and jumping on the trampoline, building forts, where stuff they couldn't do, in the city as much. There was just other activities to do.
man, your wife is a saint.
Yeah. I don't think I say it enough to her, but
Because
yes, she
that's a lot because you did the duplex and there was some convincing there, and then now moving into the mobile home park. That's awesome.
Yeah, the previous house that we lived in, we did a full kitchen gut on, and I think she did dishes in the bathtub for like a month.
Oh, that's tough.
And we had a one burner stove in the kitchen, a refrigerator, and a microwave on like a plastic table. So we did that for about 2 months because when I started that remodel, we had just purchased a house that we did a conversion, turned it in a single family home into a split level home with 2 units. So I was doing that at the same time as the kitchen remodel, doing all the work myself. And so I was splitting my time doing that. Yeah, so we went through that. That was an interesting. So to come to here, this is probably the last time that I'll get away with, downsizing or
Two
remodeling.
strikes. I don't think you get the third one.
No.
So what's
Um,
driving this? Because obviously, I mean, you came from a point where, I mean, you're just figuring all this stuff out. It's not like you had somebody kind of leading you this way. Obviously, I know it sounds like you got caught onto it from the books, like the Brandon Turner's, Robert, like Rich Dad Poor Dad, all that stuff. But real estate's tough. I mean, there's a lot of, it's not, I think a lot of people like to think, oh, it's super passive and it's just this, rainbows and daisies or whatever. But
yep.
there's definitely a lot of tough aspects to it, especially when you're first starting out. I know I've gone through some mud. I think you've gone through substantial, like way more mud than I have at this point. Like, what's your driving motivation, at least starting out?
I think my driving motivation was just kind of have more financial freedom. Like once you start reading some books and learning about that, it's not something that I had in my mind starting out because, I had those glass walls in my mind of what was possible just based on, what you'd learn from teachers, your parents, and people around you. So I didn't think any of this was possible then. But once you start reading books and expanding your mind, you start to learn that there's another side to this. It's not just, work a W-2 until you're 65, retire, and hope you have 10 or 15 years of good life. There's a possibility of, getting to that point sooner in your life so you can enjoy that, retirement earlier in life when you have your youth and going on hikes with your kids and have time with your kids. So I think part of it was the fact of I started seeing what was possible with the financial freedom. But then the other side of it was my dad worked really hard, I think, as a kid. And he was the person, he got off work and then he'd get home. They bought 80 acres when I was probably, I think I was in fifth grade. They bought 80 acres. He built a log house on that property, and then logged all, I think, 70 acres by himself. He bought an excavator, he had a cat, he logged the property himself, pulled them up, made like a coal deck, and then he'd call a log truck driver to come up pick it up. So he'd get off work at 3:30, he would work until 9. But I mean, he went to every one of my sporting events, was always present, during, dinner. So it's like in my childhood, I don't look back and say, oh, I wish my dad would have been there more because in my mind, he was there all the time. But I think part of that is I'm like, I said, I want to be even more present than that with my kids. And I think that was my driving factor is I'm like, when my kids are 6 and 7, I not only want to be at every sporting event, I want to be able to wake up with them in the morning and spend that time with them, play board games, maybe at lunchtime, and then at nighttime. I want to be that present dad that has that option to do whatever, spend as much time with them as I want. So I think, and this is before I had kids, because and backing up, that's partially my mom too. My mom, during this journey when I was working so hard, she would tell me, Ryan, you're working too hard. What's your end game? What's your goal of this? So she's the one that pushed me to kind of, shape that of, what are you doing this for? I think you have to have a reason. Don't just get into real estate and do it for the money because that's a never ending goal. You can get caught up in that and work and work and work your whole life away. You need to have a goal of why you're doing this. And so she helped me form that why in my mind. And my why was my kids and family and, having that time. I can spend as much time with them as I want.
And how many units do you have currently?
Yeah, currently I have 63 tenants or 63 doors.
That's amazing. And are you self-managing it, all of them? Obviously not at the
I
moment.
was self-managing all of them until last summer. So last year was the first time I went to a real estate meetup. To that point, I didn't really know anybody in real estate. I was just kind of learning everything through books and podcasts. And I went to my first meetup. My wife kind of pushed me. She's like, I was wanting something. I felt like I was on an island. I was like, I got to this point and there's nobody around me. I don't even relate to my family anymore, my friends. I can't even have those visionary conversations with
Yeah.
people because it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
Their conversations are completely different than what I'm wanting to talk about. And so I didn't know what I was missing at the time. So I highly recommend people go to meetups and get involved in the communities because you get around other people that are speaking the same language as you. Yeah, I went to those first couple of meetups, man, and it was just like, holy cow, this is a whole room of people just like me that want to do bigger things than just, work until you're 65. They want to, and there's people 10 steps ahead of me, there's people behind me, and I enjoyed that aspect as well as not only are you looking up to the people ahead of you that can, shave years off of your learning curve, is it's talking to people that are a few steps behind you that you can relate to and help, and you're more relatable to those people that are two steps behind you than the people that are 10 steps ahead of you trying to help them.
Oh yeah, because it's almost it seems they're so far ahead, it's almost out of reach. So that it's like it kind of kills your motivation. I think when you're starting out, I think that's part of it.
Yep.
So yeah, no,
And
that's
it's
huge.
they can't relate to the emotion you're feeling at that time because you quickly forget how it felt when you bought that first single family home. That was like a Mount Everest when you went to buy that first single family home because you had all those things like the leases and background checks and all that.
Well,
That
like
seemed
you're like
huge.
talking about finding like trying to find a purchase and sale agreement. I mean, barely even knowing what a purchase and sale agreement is. I mean, just that is a hurdle within itself. It just yeah, it's funny. Yeah, it kind of brings me back to that. So yeah, totally agree.
And so that's a big thing right there is you if you're buying an apartment building, it's hard to get your mind back to that feeling of what that felt. And so those people are better off talking to somebody who's two steps ahead of them. Maybe they have three or five homes. They're a lot more relatable and can relate to how they're feeling and how to overcome that fear that they might be feeling or, of, what happens if, a tenant stops paying and stuff. There's a lot more things that they can relate to and how they're feeling in that moment. And so that's where I'm kind of figuring out is it's not that that person way ahead can't help them because they can in a lot of ways, solving those problems of where to find leases and, talk with wholesalers and how to get hard money. So there's things they can help them with, but there's also the feeling side of it that is it's hard to relate to at that point.
So you're telling me that you're not going to be going back to single family homes?
No, no, I've got two single family homes right now, and one of them is on the market. I'm selling it right now because I'm trying to transition. I like the economy of scale in the apartment buildings.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess what's your next asset that are you still planning on building that portfolio up in the multifamily space, or what's like what do you have your eyes set on right now?
Yeah, so I'm in the multifamily space. I mean, my next step after that, the mobile home park was in 2021. I was like, man, I can't get things to pencil. I want to find something that's better. So I started looking at apartment buildings, larger ones. I saw a 20 unit apartment building come on online. It was for sale by owner, another for sale by owner. And I wanted to call the guy, but I had a $150,000 HELOC and it was a $1.6 million purchase. And so I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to get the other $250,000 for the down payment. Kind of like talk, in my own mind, like fear came in again. And I'm like, okay, whatever. And it ended up going pending. And that's when I kicked myself. I'm like, I've got this. Like, I don't know why I didn't just call him and see, talk about a seller finance or something. So it went pending. It was pending for about a month. And then I saw it pop back online and I was like, I'm going to call this guy. So I call him and said, hey, I want this building. I've got $150,000. Would you carry back $250,000 of the down payment as a seller carry? He's like, let's grab lunch. And so we go and grab lunch. I'm kind of talking about what I'd done to this point, and the guy's like, "Did you remind me of myself when I was younger? Like you're just I can see you're driven, you're doing things." He was like, "I'll do the seller carry." He's like, I want to collateralize that promissory note against one of your single family homes. I think it has actually two single family homes,
Yeah.
but he's like, I'll carry it. And I was like, awesome. So now next step is, now I've got to, go inspect 20 units. How does that all work? And so
Figure it out,
I
man.
went and inspected, yeah, I went and inspected all 20 units myself, didn't hire an inspector, which I highly recommend you do. You can still inspect yourself, but I inspected all 20 units myself, crawled through all the attics, the crawl space, everything, took videos and, documented all the fixes each unit needed, which I highly recommend when you're buying the larger stuff, because then you can go back and when you got a turnover coming up, you can look at the videos and see how big of a turnover it's going to be. And then right after you purchase, if you got a list of, immediate attention items that need to get fixed, you can get a handyman in there and get them to fix those units, those things that are wrong right away before they cause more damage. Ended up getting him to take $50,000 off the purchase price. Yeah, I think I closed on that one, or no, May 29th of 2021. I quit my job that exact same day that I closed because the cash flow on this, covered pretty much what I was making at the time. And then my second son was born 3 days later.
That's a good feeling.
So yeah, that was it was a whirlwind there. I was definitely stressed. I remember sitting in the hospital. My son and wife were, asleep, and I'm trying to onboard all the tenants into my property management software. And it's like 10 o'clock at night. I'm like, okay, this is definitely like the most stress I've felt in a while. It's that next big thing that just happened. And I remember thinking like, okay, I remember how it felt right before I bought a single family home. And I remember how stressed I was. But then I remember looking back on that 2 years later and being like, hey, that single family home was not that big of a deal. It just seemed like a big deal in the time. that I was doing it. But now you're doing bigger things. I had a 5 unit, so a single family home didn't seem like a big deal anymore. And so that's how I convinced myself that night sitting in the hospital. I was like, you've got this. You've done this before. This is just the next big stage, and you're going to look back on this in 2 years, and you're going to be like, that was nothing. You'll be doing bigger and better things.
So now
And
that
so
we're
that
more
kind of
than
got me
two
through that.
years, now that we're more than 2 years out from that, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, it's totally true. It seems like so writing leases to me is almost like brushing your teeth. I was managing those units, unit turnovers, running 2 or 3 unit turnovers in a month is, nothing. It's not nothing, but I mean it's become like my norm that I'm used to. But yeah, over about 18 months on that prop, I think I did 8 renovations, pushed the rents up, enacted like utility surcharges, pushed the expenses down. I pushed the value of that up about $1.1 million in about an 18-month window. I refinanced that property, I think in May of 23 or somewhere around maybe it was December of 23, and pulled out $650,000, which that at that time, for I mean, even still, that's a lot of money. And
Yeah,
I was
no,
like,
that's
man,
still a
this
good
is,
chunk, man. That's awesome.
yeah. And so I was like, man, I've got a proven concept now. I was like, I got to go do this again. So I started looking, for the next property, and kind of back to your question about, what did it look like after 2 years? Well, now I've seen a proven concept. Definitely not worried about getting a unit that's another 20 unit building. I'm like, I like this process and how this has gone. So I start looking for that next unit. And I found a 27 unit building that I had actually seen before I bought the 20 unit. It sold right before I bought the 20 unit. And that was, it was out of my league at the time. I think they sold it for about 1.2. I saw it pop back online for 2.2 million. They'd pushed the value up quite a bit. And I was running comps on my building, what I was getting for rent. My underwriting showed that if I put about 200,000 in this building, I could push it up to about 3.4 million. So add another $1 million. I went and did the walkthrough on the building. There's the 4 other people there. I was kind of new at the time. So I mean, I didn't even think I was kind of giddy. I was like, I got to get the next deal. So I put a full price offer. I was like, I want this deal. I know I can push it up. Probably could have negotiated a little bit with them, but just wanted to get the deal. They accepted the offer, got it under contract. I went home that night and I said, babe, we just got an offer accepted on a 27 unit. Like, I even told her about this at this point. I was just like, we just got an offer accepted on a 27 unit. And she looks at me and she's like, Ryan, we're leaving in 2 weeks to go on a 6-week camping trip through southern Utah. And I'm like, okay. She's like, how are you going to make that work? And I was like, well, I can make it happen. So I went and bought Starlink, went and got some lithium batteries, got my trailer set up because we were going to boondock about half the time on this trip in the middle of nowhere. So I had to be able to, have the power, the inverter, and everything to run Starlink and have internet. This one I had an agent on though, so that definitely helped, with the communication back and forth, and the agent can be on site when I was doing different inspections. That definitely made this easier. So I was like, we'll make this work. So kind of did the inspections again. I hired an inspector this time because it helps with the negotiations too. When you have an inspector
Big time.
giving a report for the property, you can definitely, rather than me going to them and say, hey, this is a problem, this is a problem. It's a professional.
It's gonna be hard getting concessions if it's just hearsay.
Yeah, hearsay. So you get a professional writing. I still inspected 26 of the 27 units. The one, wasn't able to get into because of the tenant, but I inspected 26 of the units. This again, just went through, wrote down what was wrong. This building was definitely hadn't been kept up as well as the other buildings. So there was a lot of, problem tenants, a lot of issues that needed to be remedied right away. So I ended up getting, I think, a 50,000 off. I probably should have went for more at the time, but you learn as you go. But yeah, so we went on our trip, kind of ran through, started going through the financing portion of this deal, got almost to the end with this bank, and the bank came back and said, Ryan, we can't do the loan. Your global cash flow is not high enough. Wait a sec. So I didn't even know what global cash flow meant at the time.
I'll be
So I'm like,
completely
okay,
honest with you. I don't know what global cash flow it means either.
okay. So global cash flow is pretty much your debt that you're paying on all your properties to your income. So
Yeah,
your income goes over your global cash over your debt, and they want that to be at a 1.25 ratio. Well, I had
gotcha.
just maxed out a loan on that 20 unit and pulled a ton of cash out. So my global cash flow wasn't looking real good, even though I had a large chunk of cash that I was going to put on this property. So it pretty much ate all my cash up.
So they were looking for a particular number for your NOI, essentially.
Yeah, well, they wanted me to be able to clear. They wanted the cash flow to be 1.25% or 1.25 times my debt load that I had
Gotcha.
from all my other properties. So they were like, we just can't make this. So I think I was hitting like a 1.15. They were like, hey Ryan, if you had one more of these properties under your belt doing a value add, we could probably overlook this metric. But you've only got two. You have a 5 unit, a 20 unit, and now you're going bigger. We're like, it's just a little too risky for us. So that was a hard pill to swallow because I thought I was at the finish line ready to close on this thing. So I talked to my agent. She knew a broker, a loan broker, and she said, I think he might be able to tweak some things. We might be able to add back in some of your CapEx expenditures that you've done on your 20 unit and your other single family homes, pretty much, stuff you're fixing to renovate. They might be able to add that back and not have that count against you as, expenses. So we started going down that road. That was a lot of paperwork. I remember sitting there a lot of late nights when we were camping because I didn't want to, I didn't want it to affect our camping trips. So
Yeah.
we'd go out hiking all day, come back, put the kids to bed, and then work. So I started sending him all that stuff. They got it up. I think they got it to like a 1.2. So they did bring up my debt, coverage or the global cash flow, but it still wasn't quite there. So they're like, hey, it's just not going to work. So at that time, I was like, I'm going to wholesale this apartment building. And so I joined sub two that May, hadn't been involved in sub two at all. I was just kind of like, I liked that, what Pace was doing, joined the program, but I wasn't really involved in the community. But I started posting it on the Facebook page and got some traction. Had about 5 or 6 people that, were interested in the deal. Definitely, they'd done nothing this big. So I knew they were going to have a hard time getting loans on it and making it work. And that at that time, the broker called me, the second broker that I was using for the loan. He was like, Ryan, he's like, you should try to really figure out how to make this deal work because this is like the best cash flowing property I've seen in like 2 years come across my desk. So I was like, okay. So he's like, maybe try to go get private money or hard money and take this thing down. And so that kind of clicked to, switch in my head. And I was like, I'm going to call this hard money lender that I met at a real estate meetup, or no, I met him over Facebook, and he was we had done a conference call. So networking is huge.
Yeah.
We had done a conference call. He was a, small family hard money lender. They had like a bunch of family money pooled together. So it was a lot less underwriting than some of the other hard money guys.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I had my inspection, the appraisal, the environmental, everything kind of ready to go from the previous loans. And I sent that over to him on December 20th, and he closed the loan like 9 days later on a 27-unit apartment.
Holy cow. That's
Yeah, and
fast.
I think I had to close it before the end of the year. 11% interest only loan. So my payments were $16,000 a month on the loan.
Interest
And I think
only
I
makes a
so
huge difference. That's awesome.
yeah. So it definitely was a lot more expensive money. Going back, the one loan broker talked about doing a bridge loan, which is the route I should have probably gone, but I had kind of drug my feet a little bit. Like I was a little bit worried about the economy at the time with the multifamily space and, what was happening with interest rates. And I was kind of almost ready just to back out. So fear kind of got in my way again. That's a common denominator that's, happened along the way, and it will happen to everybody who's an investor. You're gonna have fear creep in no matter what level you're at. And so I drug my feet.
That's the hard part. You get to that point where, I mean, you've had a pretty substantial amount of success, but you're still at that point where you've got kind of an imposter syndrome to in a certain
Yep.
extent, and yeah, that's tough.
I remember I heard Pace. I mean, he talked about, I think it was either at Monterey or maybe a squad up, but he talks like Tony Robbins and some of those high level guys and about imposter syndrome. And they're like, Pace, we still feel the exact same way.
Which is
Even at
crazy.
those people that are that far, you still get imposter syndrome. And he's like, you just kind of have to kill that feeling every day of like, no, I've got this. I've got a lot of, things that I need to help other people with and teach people. So yeah, kind of that got through that little bit of imposter syndrome and that fear and ended up closing on that deal. That was another one, kind of hired a handyman, got a buddy who was a handyman, got him up there, said, hey, I'll probably have you at least 30 to 40 hours a week. I did kind of a stair stepping rent raises. I sent first month, I sent about 10 rent increases out. Second month, I sent another 10. And then the third month, I think I sent another 7. I also put in like utility surcharges on chargebacks. And it worked out well. It was like a natural. We had about one turnover a month, sometimes two turnovers. But I had also the crew for my other building because these two buildings were a quarter mile apart. So I was able to use my other people when I needed extra people to, renovate the second unit when there was two going at the same time. We renovated, I think we did about 12 of those units over about a 16-month window. So about, one a month. Sometimes it was two. Yeah, I fixed up the building. And right now I'm looking at a refinance on that building. And I pushed that building up about 1.5 million. The appraisal just came in. It was at 3.7
Dude, that's awesome.
over about a
Congrats.
16-month window. Hoping to get the refinance done here soon. I've got a $100,000 siding job going on that one right now. Another thing that was I budgeted I think 75. I got a bid for 58. He started the project and partway through the project, he's like, "Hey Ryan, there's a 20 foot tall by about 60-foot section of brick that's detaching from the building." He's like, "We're gonna have to demo that off." He's like, "At the top, it's pulled out about 4 inches. It's starting to pull the rim joist from the third floor off." I was like, "Okay, what's that gonna, raise the budget?" And he's like, "Oh, it'll be about 40,000." I went from a 58,000 to almost $100,000 job just in, that little short period of time. So, you definitely have those things that come up with larger buildings, and you got to plan for those capital expenditures that you didn't, initially for. So that was about 25,000 over budget, what I thought it was going to be.
So I guess, I mean, at this point, how do you decide when enough is enough? Like, where's your sights at right now?
Yeah, and so I think I've hit the point of where I hit that glass ceiling, or not glass ceiling, but I've hit that goal of the financial freedom, being able to spend as much time with my kids. But I think one of the things I've figured out after I left my job, and a lot of people will find this if they do leave their job, is your job does give you a certain amount of happiness that a lot of people don't realize. It gives you a purpose. And when you don't have that, you got to find purpose somewhere else.
Yeah.
And you can find, like family is definitely your biggest purpose, and spiritually, if you're a spiritual person. But then you also have to find that, that level of purpose of, doing something, else. And so that's kind of where I've been kind of molding this over like 2 years of now, what do I do that kind of gives me, that fulfills me and fills my cup? And I think giving back and helping others is what I've kind of shifted all my mind to. Is I'm like, if I can help other people do the same thing I've done, or pull them into projects that I'm doing and get them, that passive income, that maybe in 5 years they can be out of their W-2 jobs. I think that's where I find the most fulfillment. It's not an easy task because a lot of people, it's shaping, it's changing their mindset of what they've, been programmed for
Big time.
30, 40, 50 years.
Once you get to doing more of that, I think it's just going to increase your portfolio even more, to be honest with you. Because the
Mhm.
more you help out others, I think it just comes back tenfold. It's kind of crazy how
Yes.
that works. But the more abundant your mindset, I think the better off you are. 100%.
Yep. And helping, I mean, is pulling more people in. Like at this point for me, it's not, obviously, money is a motivating factor, but it's I think what's going to be the most rewarding thing, and I think Pace talked about a little bit, is when you have that one person that came to you, comes to you and it's like, "Hey, you changed." Even if I didn't help them directly, just posting content and hopefully giving them that nugget that pushes them over the edge to maybe take a little risk in real estate, or directly handholding somebody, getting them into a deal that gives them passive income, gives them that first mailbox money, and they're like, "I want more of this." And then you see them kind of get to the point where they can quit their job. I can only imagine that that's going to be like the most rewarding feeling.
Oh yeah, 100%. That's I quit my job back in 2023, and it's yeah, that feeling, it's definitely surreal when you get to that point.
Yep. It's
So
those mini Mount Everest. Your Mount Everest you look at just a little bit out, you once you get to it, then you're like, okay, you find that I think if you're a motivated person and a true visionary, is you get to that peak you thought was the peak, and then you get to there and you look up and it's like, oh, there's another peak,
oh yeah,
or you have to set that peak to kind of give you that next purpose. And I think that's what true happiness is you have to do something that's always pushing, it's always pushing you. I think if you just settle and become, you hit those plateaus, I think that's where you can fall into depression, and it's not as rewarding as people look forward to retirement. And a lot of people get to retirement and they die because they don't find that purpose, and they just sit around, watch TV and don't do anything. And you got to stay busy and keep that mind going, and that's where you find true happiness.
yeah, you don't use it, you lose it. 100%.
Yep.
So from, like, say your kids, because obviously I mean, I can tell you're definitely a family man, which is awesome. I definitely appreciate that. From say your kids are listening to this like 20 years down the line, what would you want them to hear? Or maybe I'd say 20 years is a long time, maybe 10 years. 10 years. What would you want them to hear, or advice that they could take from this?
Pace, yeah, Pace kind of talked about this a little bit, and it kind of got me thinking. And he said if had if something was written on your gravestone, what would you want it to be? And I thought about that a lot. And what I would want written is that Ryan was always present in the moment. I think that's what I would want written on my gravestone, and I think that's what I want with my kids. And I hope they can look back in 10 years and be like, my dad was present in all of those moments of camping and stuff. So I struggle with that a lot too, even now, is when you're working and stuff is, but it's something that I'm self-aware of, and I'm always working on to become more present, because kids are the most present beings out there. They're in the moment all the time. So I strive to be more like a kid, I guess. And I think a lot of people need to be. Yeah, I'd say the advice that I would try to give them is just, find something that, you that makes, gives you fulfills your purpose. Sometimes that may not necessarily be the first thing you go do. Maybe you get into real estate and it's not doesn't fulfill you like you want, but real estate as a passive income can get you to where you have time freedom. And that's what I'm telling people I'm talking to right now is you can get that time freedom. Once you get the time freedom, then you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Then you can go join nonprofits. You can go help at the school with your kids. You can do anything. Opening up that mindset of what's possible once you get that time freedom is unlimited.
Well, honestly, there is a ton of stuff. Like, I feel like there's way more stuff we could unpack, but I want to be respectful of your time. But one thing I've been trying to do is, with each of my podcasts, is it's a ownership lightning round. So we're gonna just fire some questions at you real quick answers.
Okay. I'll try to keep it short.
All right. So, biggest recent failure that's become a blessing.
Recently, I was going through the refinance actually on this 27 unit, and I got almost to the finish line of having the deal go through or the loan go through. And the bank came and they said, "Hey, this property is not zoned for a 27 unit apartment building." And they said, so with that, they do grandfather you in, but the insurance, the way they grandfather in is that if the building is destroyed, you have to build it back as an R1 of what it's zoned currently, which would be like a single family home. So it was a hard pill to swallow. And then they started going into the insurance and it being a structure that's they call unreinforced masonry. They were trying to back out of the deal and they ended up backing out. And I think at that point I started, it was a hard pill to swallow. Like, it wasn't anger that came in, but it was almost like disappointment because I'd been looking forward to this happening so I could go on to that next thing. It made me start to like look back at, kind of like Pace talks about is what has to be true to make this, like the best thing that ever happened. And I haven't figured out why that is, but I always look at everything that happens in life as there's a reason this happened. When I found out, the day I found out I got the appraisal at 3.7 million, I knew I was going to make 1.5, million and pull a bunch of cash out. We put an offer on a house that we had been looking at. It wasn't our perfect home, but it pretty much covered all the bases that we wanted. But one of the things that I didn't like about the house is it was close to the highway. And one of the reasons I want to move back into the country is for that serenity and that, just being I had lived in the city now for like 13 years. I just want to be out in the country and I want that peace and quiet that I miss as a kid. And I want that for my kids. So when I found that out, I was like, you know what? I'm going to back out of this house that we're going to purchase that's kind of making ends meet a little bit. And so I was going to not build and I was going to buy this house. And so I think in a way it happened for a reason because now we're looking at building and what we're building is it's on that 80 acres that my parents bought way back when. My sister lives there, my mom lives there, my buddy lives there, my sister's in-laws live there, their brother
Family
or
compound.
yeah, it's a family compound. And I think it was just in a way it was kind of just God telling me like this isn't what I want for you. This is where you need to be is like just close to family. Even though that other house is only 5 or 7 minutes away, I think there's a lot of memories that my kids are going to get from being able to walk to grandma's house across the road and walk down to my sister's house to play with cousins. And so I think that's the blessing in disguise I've got. Took me a little while to kind of realize that, but I think that's what it's kind of pushing me towards.
That's awesome. When he taps on your shoulder, you got to listen sometimes.
Yes. Yep.
Sometimes it's hard to see if that's the right direction or not. So I totally understand that. One underrated habit behind your growth.
Underrated habit. Ooh.
What has made you the most successful, and like, what's the habit that like comes top of mind?
I think I'm definitely an obsessive compulsive person. When I learn about something, I go like my wife, she always talks about it because I become obsessive with it and really go at it hard for like a couple months. And I become like not an expert in it, but I learn and learn and learn. And she always makes fun of me because she's like, "Oh, you're in one of those modes or those, seasons." And she doesn't make fun of it in a negative way. She's grown to learn that it's a good thing because it's a part of my growth cycle that I have. When I learned about pace, I met Landon Moore in Arizona for lunch when we were on that 6 week camping trip, and he told me about pace, and so I started consuming content when we were driving. I'd be listening to him when I was working on the 27 unit stuff at night. And I was just like, man, it's something about this, this community that he's built is amazing. So I became obsessive with it. I got back, and to my fault, I started almost wanting to create a wholesale company. I got VAs, cold calling, all that stuff, and started this whole thing. Then again, I'm smart enough to realize when I start getting shiny object syndrome and start going down that path is I'm like, this isn't what I want. And so I did that for a few months and then I pulled back and said, no, that's not the path I want to go. This is not in alignment with what I want. And so I pulled back and stopped the VAs and because I was kind of working myself back into a job,
Oh,
which is the
100%.
opposite of being present with my kids.
Yeah,
And
wholesale
so I
operations are not easy in any way, shape, or form. I don't think
no.
I'd ever want to go that route, to be honest with you. But that's just
Yep.
me.
And so that's kind of a little thing that I have that yeah, it's definitely a small thing, but it's been my superpower, throughout all of my growth.
No, I'm the same way. Once I find something that I'm about to like something new that I'm interested in, I lock in and I go down a deep rabbit hole until I figure it out.
Yep. Yeah. 100%.
That's what like because I remember we talked about like the self-directed individual retirement accounts. That was the same way when I got a hold of that. When it just
I love it.
deep
Yep.
dive.
I'm on your last video, I think, on that series. So working through that, and I've already sent that your stuff to a few different people that are curious about it. So
That's funny. I hope
you're
it's
helping
actually
others
helpful
you don't
for you.
even know about. What's that?
I said I hope it's actually helpful for y'all. That's the main
Oh yeah.
purpose of it.
Hey, you're getting your imposter syndrome right now.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
definitely helpful, dude.
dude.
There's a
That
lot
it
in
creeps
there.
up on everybody. Like I've had that. I've had that creep in a lot. So yeah, that's something definitely working on for sure. One last one. Book you'd gift the most.
I mean it's kind of, everybody says the same one is this Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Hmm.
And it's just because it's a mindset thing. And I think that's what a lot of people have to get over is they have to get over that glass walls in their mind and the programming they've had, going and get that W-2 job. I have a nephew that just graduated high school. I just actually ordered that book 2 days ago and I'm seeing him this weekend and I'm gonna give him that book because if I would have had that book, at a young age, I think I would have definitely, just the way I am, I would have gone down a different route or started real estate a lot earlier. Could have been bad, could have been good. Because I mean, I graduated in 2005, so maybe I would have, lost everything, and that wasn't in the plan. But I want to be able to give him that book just for the mindset, and he can choose to use it how it is, or how he chooses. But I think that's the book that kind of can reshape a lot of people's like the way they think about money and their job and passive income.
There's something I don't know. It kind of comes to mind when like hearing you discuss through things, especially your path in real estate. It was not. I don't think it was necessarily an easy path by any means. You took definitely a hard path in a lot of routes, but I think you've come out way better for it. But so it's like a quote that I go over like each year. I try to have some type of quote that kind of gives me encouragement throughout the year. But it's the one for this year is you cannot expect God to bless what you're too lazy to build, and I think that applies pretty
Like that.
well with you're definitely not lazy and you're building something pretty great. So it's awesome, awesome to see.
Thanks. I love that. I love that quote. That's a strong quote for
Yeah.
sure. But thank you.
Yeah, that's awesome to see. What? How can people help you? What one thing at the end of these podcasts, I want to make sure that if people are coming to you, they obviously want I want them to bring value, not something. Hey, I'm just going to come pick your brain, stuff like that. But what are you looking for at the moment, and what's the best way for people to reach you?
So yeah, two things is I'm trying to spread content to kind of help other people. So I mean, the more followers you get, I think the more reach you get on social media. So people can follow me on Instagram. It's Byan Ryan or Byan_Ryan, just BUYIN underscore Ryan.
Yeah, I'll
And so
put
yeah,
that in the
follow me on
description.
there and just liking and stuff the content if you like it. But then also I'm kind of having a shift into RV parks right now where I'm looking to use my multifamily underwriting and skills that I've learned through that in RV space because is the multifamily can help out the community quite a bit because you can buy affordable multifamily, fix them up, make them nicer for the community. But I see I can help the community quicker, I think, in the RV space with the long-term RVs, especially in my area where, housing is very expensive. So creating affordable housing through RV parks is kind of where I'm headed right now. So I'm underwriting, hopefully going to get one under contract here in the next week or so. But yeah, bringing me RV parks in the Northwest, kind of, Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana, definitely would love to kind of help people, underwrite and partner on something like that. So
For sure.
that would be, that'd be awesome.
Awesome, man. Well, perfect. Well, with that, thanks for coming on the show. It was awesome, awesome chatting with you, man.
Yeah.
Excited
Yeah.
to
Thanks for having me,
excited to
Josh. I
see where you
appreciate
go
it.
this next year. All right, guys, we will catch you on the next one.